Hello, everyone. Gordon Causey. Hello, bonjour, guten tag, buenos tardes, annyeonghaseyo, ni hao. That's about all I got. I'm not going to do this in multilingual. I can't. I can do it in English and I could get by in French and nothing else. So what I call this, I called it "What's Coming." What's going to be happening in the fall, and uh, and I think it's going to get ugly. And this is coming from the perspective of a Canadian living in Ontario, Canada, same province as Toronto. So if you're not in Canada, most people are familiar with Toronto. At least I'm about 2 hours east of the big smoke in a rural area. But it's just been reported in the news that Western University, which is a decent size, highly regarded institution in London, Ontario, they are going to be requiring this fall students attending classes will have to be boosted, COVID, vaccine boosted, and masked. Personally, I find that disconcerting. But what are you going to do? Go to a rally, go wave signs. We know the vaccines don't stop infection, don't stop transmission, but they're requiring a booster regardless. Even after our prime minister, God knows how many times he's been reportedly boosted and keeps reportedly getting COVID. Seems kind of pointless. And I know I want to speak to one thing, one aspect. You don't hear it as much now, but it still comes out every now and again, this anti-vaxxer label. As a you're a science denier. If you're not all in on the COVID shots, then you're anti-vax. And a thought occurred to me of how to combat this brain dead, unthinking rhetoric. And the thought came to me to ask people if they like individual. Typically, those who throw around this label, this anti-vax label, will be big L liberals. And so ask them what they think of Candace Owens or another guy, Brandon Tatum. Hi, Amina. Thanks for jumping on. So someone throws an anti-vaxxer label at you, say, well, what do you think of Candace Owen? What do you think of Brandon Tatum? Hopefully they know who they are. And if they are big L liberals, they probably won't like them. And so then you can then throw at them, oh, okay, so you're a racist then. And you can imagine the response. You go, of course I'm not a racist. But you don't like Brandon Tatum, you don't like Candace Owen, they're both black. So obviously you don't like black people. And if that, you can envision where the discussion might go. They're going to say, well, just because I don't like those two people doesn't mean I don't like black people. Oh, okay. So just because I don't like this one particular ineffective, crappy shot means I'm against all shots. You're allowed to use discernment. You're allowed to use critical thinking and differentiate between what is good and what is bad. It's not one size fits all. And that was just the thought I had on the this whole anti-vax crap. But then we've got monkeypox, and I was doing it was probably back in June, doing what I'll call back of the napkin calculations, just projecting where I figured the numbers were going to go. And my guess, again, just going back of the napkin, just spitballing numbers, I figured by the end of August, we'd be looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60,000 confirmed infections globally. And that's looking pretty darn good in the sun, because we're up around 42,000 right now globally. I think it's 42,000-ish, right in around that number. That's confirmed. If you add in the suspected, it's up around 44,000, a couple thousand more. And there's a big debate going on right now, even amongst members of the medical community, as to whether or not monkeypox should be designated as a sexually transmitted disease or infection. Used in my era growing up, it was called an STD, sexually transmitted disease. Now the term has changed to STI, sexually transmitted infection. But either way, there's a big debate as to whether it should be classified as a sexually transmitted disease or infection or not. And likewise, is it confined to the male gay community, this so-called men who have sex with men demographic? And I have a big question. I'll answer your question in a second, Amina, but the big question I have it centers on the testing going on, because there was an article in early August in CTV News, one of our mainstream publications in Canada, that said in Ontario that testing they'd only done 1,600 odd tests since going back from May right up until early August. So, really through an eyedropper, they're doing tests. When it was COVID, it was a fire hose. They were testing anything that moved. And so the question I have is testing being restricted overwhelmingly to the male gay community? Because and I'm just spitballing the numbers right now, but if 98% of the tests are being done in gay men, then obviously 98% of the infections you're going to find are going to be in gay men. Is testing going on outside of the community? Having done some reading, I'm also finding out they're saying that monkeypox, it's not a simple diagnosis. Someone comes in presenting symptoms. There are apparently a number of different diseases that mirror monkeypox. That could, diagnosis is not a simple cut and dry, put checks in the box, because you put the checks in the box and then you might have 4 or 5 different diseases, maybe more, that it could still be. And that's where testing comes in. And I openly speculate and wonder if a straight guy goes into the doctor presenting a rash and other symptoms that could be COVID, that could be seasonal flu, could be herpes, could be any number of things. Do they then say, well, have you engaged in sexual congress or sexual intimacy with men in the last little while? No, I'm not gay. No, I'm not gay. Oh, okay. Well, then I'm wondering whether healthcare providers, if they're saying, well, okay, that rules out monkeypox, we won't do a monkeypox test. Whereas if it's a clinic that deals with sexually transmitted diseases among the gay community, is it more de rigueur, standard operating procedure? Okay, let's do that monkeypox test. It's a question, because without data, you can't measure something. We can't compare monkeypox to COVID, because monkeypox, 1,600 tests in the province of Ontario over almost a 3-month period. And we do that many tests in an hour in Ontario during COVID. And what's Amina saying? She's saying, will jabs become mandatory? Well, Western University is now mandating that students, and at that London, Ontario University, that students, if they want to attend classes, that they wear a mask and that they have, that they show proof of having been had, I guess, at least 3 shots. They have to have been boosted. And she asks, what about the ArriveCan app? I'm not 100% up on this, because I do not even own a smartphone. All I have is a cracked old S3 or an S4 Samsung that I used for talking and texting. I don't have one single app. But from what I understand, that it's very difficult, problematic for Canadian travelers returning into Canada who don't, like me, don't have this app, that I haven't had to deal with it on a first-hand basis because I haven't traveled. I haven't been anywhere since coming back from the Caribbean I think we came back in January of 2020 before all this insanity hit. From what I understand, there are restrictions placed on those who refuse to use this ArriveCan app. And I'm not 100% sure what they are. I think there may be questions of quarantine and things like that, but again, I'm not sure. But that, so where is monkeypox going? I figured 50, 60,000 cases globally by the end of September would be confirmed. Now, beyond that, then it gets scary because my reckoning is that by the end of September, globally, we'll be up to 500,000-600,000 and then millions by the end of the year. I genuinely do believe this is going to blow up, do all the reading you want on it. There are all kinds of publications out on it in scientific journals and the like. PubMed, which is a branch of the National Institute of Health in the United States, and they have papers out that indicate that the monkeypox virus has been identified in airborne aerosols. So the tiny, minuscule little aerosols that float around in the air for hours and can travel 30 plus feet. And they've tested them and found that, yes, the virus is present in aerosols. Now, does that mean it is an airborne virus? From what I understand, that would mean that you'd have to be susceptible to infection from inhaling, coming into contact with these airborne aerosols. And there's a question of viral load. Is there enough viral load in the aerosols to make a person sick? And it's something that I believe is impossible to test because it's unethical, because you would have to take a person known to be uninfected with monkeypox and you would have to expose him to aerosols of the virus and then see if he gets sick. In other words, you'd have to take a healthy individual and see if the person becomes sick. And then if they become sick, and then there have been cases, a few in Europe, a few more in Africa, where people have actually died from this virus. So that creates all manner of ethical issues. So how do you test it? And also the question I have is, right now it's the summertime. I don't believe, as I understand it, aerosols linger in the air longer depending upon the humidity conditions in a room. And it's summertime, we're outside and everything. I think we'll find out if monkeypox is a airborne transmissible virus more in the fall and winter, when we're spending more time indoors. And I think when the humidity conditions are more conducive to that mode of transmission, we'll find out. In other words, I don't think anyone knows. And we've been through this during the entire COVID madness because people are bemoaning the fact that there is a general lack of confidence that people have, broadly speaking, that confidence in public health officials has gone down significantly during the COVID era. Well, big surprise, because rather than being honest with lay people like me, they basically guessed about a lot of things. I mean, picture, what do we know about COVID? Well, the facts, there are 100% of the facts are out there, but we only know what 10% of them are. We've got a tiny little snapshot of this huge picture. So based on that tiny little snapshot, we're going to proclaim what we believe to be the truth. So at the beginning of COVID, we were told, the chance of human-to-human transmission based on everything we know is so incredibly small, we don't have to do anything. We don't need to have people isolating. We don't have to bring in travel restrictions. The Trump administration down in the States, when they imposed travel restrictions in February, everyone said they're overreacting, they're going too far in the US. They're stigmatizing, it's xenophobic, and they threw all this out. But they were wrong. But rather than say they were wrong, I just saw an interview that Fauci was involved in on a mainstream American network. And he was, in full apologetics mode, trying to defend himself and saying that they weren't wrong, that the science evolved. No, you were wrong. You said, well, if you had said, well, based on what we know right now, which is only a fraction of all, what we need to know, we only know a very small bit. And based on that small bit, we think maybe. But no, that's not the way they present it. They present it as this is fact. And now Amina Sufi is asking, is monkeypox a bioweapon? Was it created in a lab? Recall that with COVID, with SARS-CoV-2, that at the beginning, any suggestion that it came from a lab would get you knocked off of social media and deplatformed. Now, you're allowed to say that it's widely considered by many experts as, yeah, it came out of a lab. Did monkeypox come out of a lab? I don't know. And I don't think, if it did, I don't think anyone's ever going to admit it. But I think an indication that it very well could have come from a lab is the fact that, and you can check this out, they're reporting that the version, the strain of monkeypox, these two clades that have come out, or clades, I don't know how they pronounce it, that they have mutated about 50 times from what monkeypox was back in. Monkeypox has been a virus that's been known about since 1958, and they had existing samples from what it looked like in 2018 or 19. And over the last 2-3 years, it's undergone 50 mutations, when, according to the experts, in a normal year, it would only undergo 1 or 2 mutations. So in a period of time where maybe 4 to 8 mutations should have been expected, instead 50 mutations have shown up. And that suggests to me, no pun intended, I guess, yeah, pun fully intended, someone was monkeying around with the virus in a lab, which is what they do. We have one of these labs in Canada, our National Microbiology Center in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and that's what they do. They play with viruses and other bacteria and germs and such. And, we all learn the words gain of function, thanks to Fauci's leaked emails. Someone hacked into his emails and published them publicly. And it came out that the NIH had been funneling money, sub-grants, to that lab in Wuhan, China, that was working on manipulating coronaviruses like SARS-CoV-2. Is that smoking gun proof that SARS-CoV-2 was a manipulated virus? Not quite. It's not definitive proof, but it certainly is a strong indication, which is why many people, many experts, unlike me, some guys with genuine background in virology and infectious disease, are convinced that SARS-CoV-2 is a manufactured, man-made virus taken from a bat, the original virus taken from a bat, and then perhaps manipulated so as to enable it to infect human beings and to transmit from person to person. Remember, at the beginning of COVID, we were told that the chance of human transmission was incredibly low. Don't be overly concerned about this. The chance of human transmission, be more worried about the flu, is what we were told back in January and February of 2020. And rather than saying, we were wrong, which is what they should say, instead they said, well, the science evolved. No, the science didn't evolve. You made a guess based on a limited amount of information. You didn't have all the data, you didn't have all the info, you didn't have all the research. You just had a tiny little slice, and you decided to take that tiny little slice and try and present yourself as an expert knowing everything about it, and you were wrong. Your guess was wrong. Admit it, but they won't. I'm tilting at windmills. And so, COVID, we've got Now we've got the government of Canada has just announced that it has secured 12 million doses of a Moderna, I'll call it a booster. It's and I forget the term, bivalent, or I can't pronounce it, but basically it's a vaccine that targets two, either two diseases or two variants of the same disease. Like with the flu shot, they'll try and choose, the most dominant strains. Well, apparently this newest booster that Moderna, that Canada is getting 12 million doses of from Moderna, that it targets both the original SARS-CoV-2 as well as Omicron. But in a CBC News article I was reading today, there was an expert openly speculating, well, what's the point? Omicron isn't the dominant strain anymore. It's now this BA5. And even before, in between BA5 and Omicron, there was BA2. So it's like we're two variants behind. And there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Geert Vandenbosch, who I would invite anyone to listen to. He's former head of vaccine development with GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, senior roles in vaccine development with Novartis and with Gavi, and I forget exactly what Gavi stands for, but it's the Global Alliance Vaccine Initiative or something. It's a big pro-vaccine lobby group. And he also worked for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in their vaccine development program. So again, Dr. Geert Vandenbosch, hardly a guy who's dedicated his entire career to vaccine development, and not anti-vax by any stretch of the imagination, just as someone who doesn't necessarily like the opinions of a Candace Bergen or Candace Owen, or this Brandon Tatum. You're allowed to have, just because someone's black, if you don't like their opinions, it doesn't mean you're racist. And just because you don't like one particular vaccine doesn't mean you're anti-vax. Anyway, so we're getting 12 million doses of this thing. And I think that speaks to the fact that we're being primed and programmed to anticipate another wave of COVID. So on top of monkeypox, which we'll see if I'm right in terms of the numbers I'm projecting. I think 50, 60,000 by the end of September is pretty much a slam dunk the way things are going. Cases are going up by 1,000 or 2,000 a day now. I think testing levels are escalating somewhat. But then I think by the end of September, we'll be up to 500,000, 600,000. Will that happen? We'll see. But if it does, well, I can see us having, a new wave of COVID, monkeypox cases exploding higher. And then there's talk of now they're going to, I haven't heard of any cases of actual polio happening, not in Canada, not in the United States, not in any Western developed country. But they keep talking about it, and Theresa Tam is saying that they're going to start doing wastewater surveillance in major urban centers, places like Toronto, Ottawa, etc. And they're going to start testing for polio to see if it's existing. So that, to me, I use the term program. We're being programmed to think about it, programmed to have it on our radar, so that if and when it does happen, we told you about that. Then the world is full of viruses. I mean, then there's this form of hemorrhagic fever called Marburg that has gotten a little bit of press, but not very much. And then there's one Langya-Hanipa which has been identified by the Taiwanese Centers for Disease Control. 35 cases, haven't seen any further reporting on it. And I almost feel like it's the calm before the storm, and that things are going to start to hit in the fall and in the winter. And then, of course, you've got all the other global issues that can pop up. food supply issues, the ramifications of countries like the Netherlands and Canada basically bringing in measures that are going to bankrupt farmers by increasing tariffs on fertilizer and diesel fuel, making it making it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for them to supply Canadians with food. I guess we can import it, have food sent on planes, ships, and trucked everywhere. I guess we don't care about global carbon emissions anymore. I don't know. The world has gone bat something crazy. But the only thing at the end of the day is I'm saying be ready, because it strikes me that we're being programmed so that to have these things in our consciousness. Recall that in the years leading up to COVID, you had all kinds of movies out like Outbreak and Contagion and others, and they all always centered on this theme of a global pandemic and a deadly disease spreading around. So when COVID came out, people kind of said, well, we were told, we were warned this was going to come. I have an issue with all the numbers. I mean, an 88-year Hank Aaron, who's a baseball Hall of Famer, second or third all time in home runs, was the home run king until Barry Bonds filled himself with steroids to surpass him. Hank Aaron, 80 plus years of age, went public with his COVID vaccination because he was well aware of something that Black Americans in particular are very familiar with, and I may not be pronouncing the name of the place right, but it's called Tuskegee, and it's something called the Tuskegee Study. Some experts say the jabs are causing monkeypox, is what Amina says. I haven't seen any articles by any quote unquote experts saying that, but at the same time, that wouldn't. The whole question of long-term side effects. Pfizer's trial for their trial for, they only did one. They did one single human trial for their COVID vaccine. They call it a phase 1, 2, 3 concurrent. So just one big trial, and it's phase 1, 2, 3 all done at the same time. And it was slated initially to finish in, I think, March of 2023. Now they pushed it back till January or February of 2024. So there's no long-term safety profiles on any of these shots. That's long-term means 2+ years. So there's no long-term safety profile. So what's the impact of the shots on the human immune system? Long-term? We don't know. It wasn't studied. We moved at warp speed. How do you get over long-term safety issues that have been identified? Just don't do long-term safety studies. And you can say, well, there's no evidence of any long-term safety issues because we didn't study that. Yeah. There's no evidence of anyone in Mrs. Johnson's English class failing because Mrs. Johnson doesn't test anyone. So there's no evidence that anyone's failing her class because we've never done we've never tested the students to see if they're failing. So there is no evidence of long-term safety issues with the COVID vaccines because no long-term safety studies have been conducted. So what's the impact to the immune system? The immune system, which fights off things like viral infections, bacterial infections. Don't know. But getting back to Hank Aaron. So anyway, Tuskegee study was done down in the southern U.S. I forget exactly what state, might be Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. Southern U.S. state, Tuskegee. And they went down there, health officials went down there, and they offered Black men free health care. And they infected them with syphilis. And the reason for the study was, you can check this out, it's on the CDC's own website. The reason they did this is that they wanted to study the untreated progression of syphilis in men. So under the guise of providing free health care to these individuals, they infected them with syphilis, and then over decades would go back and run health checks on them to see how their health was being impacted by the fact that the researchers themselves had infected these men. It was disgusting. It was immoral. It was, it's Joseph Mengele type stuff, what they were doing. And aware of this, Hank Aaron knows that, or knew, because Hank Aaron's passed away now, sadly. So he made a public show of his vaccination because he wanted to show, in particular, Black American men and Black Americans in general, that you can trust the health authorities now. It's not like it was back in the 1930s or 40s when that Tuskegee study took place. We've progressed. We're better now. Now, Hank Aaron, after getting vaccinated, shortly thereafter, he passed away. Now, the thing was, he was an 87, 88-year-old man. He was in good health prior to this, but, old people do die. And and the official line is, of course, it had nothing to do with the vaccination, because Hank Aaron, he was an old guy. He was 87, 88 years of age. I forget exactly how, but he was over, he was beyond what is considered natural life expectancy in the United States. Fine. Put it under natural causes, put it under whatever you want. But when it was COVID, same situation, an 87, 88-year-old person in, long-term, someone who would be in a long-term care facility, unable to, wearing adult diapers and unable to look after themselves or even get dressed. And that person died. Well, it was a COVID death. Two standards for counting, for attributing death. It's never the vaccine, but it's always COVID. And I've talked to too many times about a young child in Alberta, Canada, who, they subjected this child to a PCR test, a child who's in palliative care, which is end-of-life care. Poor kid had stage 4 inoperable brain cancer and was receiving end-of-life care. And before he died, they subjected this child to a PCR test. And then they tried to put it in, they had a public news conference with Dina Hinshaw, criminally trying to count it as a COVID death. And that was big announcement. Alberta, we've had our youngest ever COVID death. Just at the time when they were ramping up the shots for the kids. Our youngest ever. This kid's 14 years old. The messaging was clear. When they later admitted that that was bogus and that the child hadn't died of COVID, that he died of terminal stage 4 brain cancer, when that was announced, it was whispered. Big loudspeaker to tell everyone, we've had our youngest ever COVID death in the province of Alberta. And then, no, well, he didn't die of, well, okay, we made a mistake. It was an error in judgment. Garbage. They knew exactly. Dina Hinshaw, Alberta Health Services knew exactly what they were doing. So we're going to have a challenging fall and winter time coming. And I think there's a tendency now, things have eased off. The summer's been pretty darn good. It's been close to normal. Sports leagues have been running full blast again. Kids are playing, baseball or soccer or whatever the case, lacrosse, I don't know. People have been going on vacation to the beach. The tennis clubs open, golf clubs open. None of the stuff we had to put up with over the past 2 years. That was the hilarious one. Getting back to Amina's comment about what's causing monkeypox. I have to wonder. We're seeing reported explosions in lots of things. Cancer rates are said to be on the increase. We're seeing increases in heart disease. We're seeing increases in so many conditions, and a lot of the mainstream corporate media is blaming it on the after effects of lockdowns. And the government says fully vaxxed travelers may also be subject to random PCR testing, which, there is an agenda at play here, and health is the pretext. Health is the pretext because they know that the vast majority, overwhelming majority of people are scared to death and mortally afraid of dying, and they've turned everyone into germaphobes now. People are afraid of their own hands, they're afraid of the air they breathe. And then they got everyone sucking air through a dirty piece of cloth or from one of those loose-fitting, crappy medical masks that were never designed to stop an airborne aerosol virus anyway, and that nobody wears properly anyway. If you're gonna wear something, fair enough. Fill your boots, get a proper N95. Guys, shave. If you're serious about this crap, then shave your beard. Okay. Talk to a firefighter. Talk to anyone who's been in the military who's done training on masking procedures. Get rid of the beard. You need a tight seal. It has to completely seal over the mouth and nose, and ideally eyes, nose, and mouth, because these are the three epidemiological points of entry: eyes, nose, mouth. That's how we learn this crap in grades 7 and 8 health class. It's a known, established fact. It's a reflexive, subconscious behavior to touch your eyes, nose, mouth. You don't even think about it. And our hands touch everything, including the mask that most people wear. They're constantly touching the outside of it, and then they're touching everything else, and then other people touch, and then viral spread, cross-contamination. It's why God gave us an immune system. And so if you're going to wear a mask, okay, fair enough. Again, fill your boots, wear a proper N95. Guys, shave so that it is effective, and don't touch the outside material. Treat it like PPE. Treat it the way a doctor would treat their mask going into an OR operating room setting, because it's an ideal, the outside of that mask, if it's doing what you think it's supposed to do, then it is going to collect germs, bacteria, viruses, pathogens, SARS-CoV-2, and everything else. It's a petri. You've got a petri dish on your face, so don't touch the outside material. And if you do touch the outside material, then you got to go wash your hands. And this is the problem. People are at the mall. They see someone they know. You can't really hear the person talking, so they reach and they pull the mask down, then they pull it back up. Then they go into a store and they look at a basketball and they go, "No, I don't want that one." They put it back. They touch their mask again. "I didn't like that one." And they go and they touch another one. "I don't like that one either." And they put it back. This is called cross-contamination. It's asking if we'll go back into lockdown and more restrictions in Ontario in the future. I think my own personal 2-cent opinion is that there's going to be a lot of backlash against any attempts to lock down again, with one caveat, and that being, if there are a lot of people getting sick, genuinely sick, if people are coming down with monkeypox, from what I understand, from everything I've read, in a lot of cases, these sores, and I've heard the same thing from people who have had shingles, that this rash or these sores, that they burn, that it's excruciating, the level of pain. And as well as the sores, there's also fever, aches, chills, flu-like symptoms. And with COVID, there was research done out of Iceland that was published to Nature magazine way back. It was like in August of 2020, but they scienced the living crap out of COVID. And it's because it's a small population country. It's only like 240,000 odd people. And they did, in just a matter of months, they did over 300,000 tests. They did more tests than they had population. We've done that in Canada, but it took us 2+ years to do more tests than people. They did it in months because small population, and because it's a small population, they were also able to genetically sequence every infection, so they could tell. It's kind of like fingerprinting. They can tell, okay, well this person got infected from that person. They can follow a chain of transmission because of this genetic sequencing. And what they found in their study is that 80% of the individuals in Iceland who were identified as COVID positive, that they had either no symptoms whatsoever or very mild. Basically, people wouldn't have even known they were sick. The most commonly reported symptoms in that study that they published in Nature were headache, dry, non-productive cough, and I believe muscle aches. It was dry, non-productive cough, headaches, and muscle aches and soreness, and generally described as incredibly mild. So, and that was 80% of the people who tested positive either had no symptoms whatsoever or very mild symptoms. And so if things stay like that, if it stays like it was with COVID and they try to lock down, I think there'll be pushback. But if people are falling genuinely ill with monkeypox, if they're genuinely getting ill with COVID, if they're genuinely getting ill, Marburg virus is scary sounding because it's a form of something called hemorrhagic fever. I don't know a lot about it, just some. And hemorrhagic fever attacks the kidneys, and it has a very high mortality rate. As for this Langia-Henipavirus, I don't know enough about it, but it's equally described in the article I read as being having a high mortality rate and to lead to individuals falling very sick. So if we're in a situation like with COVID, from March of 2020 up until like the end of 2020, like from all the way from March to December, I knew of one person who got it. And even that I had to hear through the grapevine. It was someone I actually knew. It was a girl I went to high school with. And I was opposed to lockdown measures from the start. So being the keyboard warrior that I am, I was on Facebook and talking and saying, this is crazy. We're shutting down the world over a virus. Like, this is nuts. And some of my friends got on my case and said, you have to take this serious. So-and-so, this girl I went to high school with, so-and-so has this. She's fighting for her life. And whoa, okay, so-and-so is fighting for her life. And I knew her. We'd gone to high school together. I hadn't seen her since high school, but we were also friends on Facebook. And later, I got in touch with her on Facebook. We had a chat. And I asked her about her, so you had COVID. Yeah. Oh, it was bad. I was really sick. I said, how long were you in hospital? Because I had this picture of her in critical care. And she said, oh, no, I never needed hospital. It wasn't that bad. She said she had isolated in a motel room north of Toronto. But that, someone goes from, they're sick and they're isolating in a hotel room north of Toronto because not wanting to take the virus home. And that gets blown up into she's fighting for her life. But that's what human beings do. That's what we do. We love to exaggerate. We love to, it's that game of telephone that we used to play as kids in school, where you start off with a tiny little message and then just watch it get blown up. And again, from March 2020 up until December, that was the only person I knew who even had gotten it. I kept asking, you know anyone getting this? And then I met a lady. She told me, well, my father died of this. I looked at this woman who had to be 70 plus. Oh, sorry to hear. Do you mind me asking how old your dad? Oh, he was 99. He would have made it to 100. Yeah. And it's a COVID death. But if that same person or someone in the exact same situation dies after getting the jabs, well, it's got nothing to do with the jabs. They would have died anyway. Talk about double standard. So I've rambled on. Amina, thanks very much for engaging. I do these late at night simply because that's when it's peaceful. And but I got stuff to do tomorrow. So God bless. Pull out the good book. And by that I'm referring to the Bible. You can find peace and comfort in those words. I'll end it with something that might be a little eye-popping for some, especially if you're not a Christian, and you tend to view this as, and I get it, to a large percentage of the population who hear the Bible and they say, oh, that's just a bunch of superstitious mumbo-jumbo, meant to control, blah, blah, blah. There are all kinds of opinions about Scripture, negative opinions. Well, here we go. From chapter 16 of the book of Revelation. It's the book where you have Armageddon, the end of the world. This is chapter 16, book of Revelation. This is the Revised Standard, so it's not the King James. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7 angels, go and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. So the first angel went and poured his bowl on the earth, and foul and evil sores came upon the men who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. That's chapter 16, book of Revelation, verses 1 and 2. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7 angels, go and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. So the first angel went and poured his bowl on the earth, and foul and evil sores came upon the men who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. What is the mark of the beast? We, even non-Christians know, 666. The number. It's a human number. Revelation in my world is full of symbolic and difficult to understand language. 6, the number 6, that's the 7 is the number that's perfection, so it's 1 less. It's not perfection, it's less than perfection. And it's also the date on which on the 6th day in Genesis, that's when the human race was created, a human number. And what is the mark? Is it actually a physical mark, on the forehead or on the right hand? Because in the Old Testament, it makes reference to the fact that men are to, worship the Lord your God with all your mind, body, strength, with everything. And it's to be as a frontlet between your eyes and as a mark upon your right hand. And it's to be as a frontlet between your eyes. It's supposed to be your focus. And your right hand would be symbolic, if you will, of your activity, what you do. Now you have the mark of the beast kind of being an imitation of that, a copy, and a mark upon there. But I've heard it described, and I like the description, that it's referred to as a transaction. You're coming into an agreement. You're coming into fellowship. coming into fellowship with God, or you're coming into fellowship with the enemy of God. So the mark of the beast. And if you look at over the course of the COVID pandemic, so much fear was driven. It was always called at the beginning, and sometimes still, it was always called the deadly coronavirus. It wasn't just the coronavirus. Sometimes it was the novel coronavirus, but a lot of the reporting was, boom, 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 boom. Dateline out of Bobcaygeon, Ontario. More cases of the deadly coronavirus strike the Frosty Pines retirement home. And there was a lot of fear. Panic porn is a term I heard used by an American comedian, Bill Maher. And fear gets people looking for a savior. And what was the savior? Science, and the high priests of science were going to save us all. So take this rushed jab that hasn't even completed its trials, that's using a platform never ever before approved for human use, that we've been working on for 20 odd years. We've been working on this for 20 odd years and never gotten an approved product out of it. But now we got it through in 8-9 months. How'd you do that? What about long-term safety? Oh, we ignored long-term safety. We didn't worry about that. It's an emergency. We don't got to worry about long-term safety. And so now you have the book of Revelation talking about pouring out bowls. And everyone who bowed down to the image of the beast, save me from my fear. I think there is a connection. Anyway, you're welcome, Mina. And I'll see you again in a few days, no doubt.